We're in the middle of this series we're calling Untethered. We're about to get into the second piece of grief tonight. And I want to just say that after this series, the first Thursday of December, a couple of weeks, Carol Holler, who's one of the people that works here at Cokesbury, does pastoral care for us. Carol is going to be leading a grief support group on Thursday nights for those weeks leading up to Christmas. If you'd like to be a part of that, you'll see more information along the way next Thursday, and just be a part of that group. It'll be sort of a short course, and what I hope for all of us will continue to be a long conversation. This whole thing about grief, I really do believe that what Brent started off talking about last night is big league critical stuff to us getting safe, us getting sober, and us getting free. Amen? I fully believe that to be true. I believe that more of us end up with resentments and feelings of being left alone, feelings of being afraid, feelings of being rejected, feelings of being abandoned, all of that for 100 different reasons that are related to grief. And this conversation about grief, we're not just talking about a physical death experience. We're talking about what does it feel like when, do any of you guys remember you're like, well, this has happened to me 9 times, I'm numb to it now. But do any of you all remember the first time you ever got fired? You remember the first time you ever got fired? First time I ever got fired, I was selling something that I knew nothing about in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was selling, I was a vice president of a sales company that sold conductive metals. Knew nothing about conductive metals. That was a trick right there. So we'd go and you sell like aluminum, copper, all this stuff to people that made switches and all kinds of reasons that they use this stuff. And so the owner of the company came to my office one day and she goes, "Mark, you have had a record quarter." And I said, "This is great, man. Super. Thank you for telling me." She goes, "Yeah, you're going to get fired." I thought she was kidding. I'm like, "You're kidding, right?" She goes, "No, the thing about it is you're making too much money. We literally cannot afford you. You're fired." I'm like, I heard none of what she said except that I was fired. And it just rocketed through me. It rocketed through me. You haven't lived as a pastor until some church fires you. You got to go through that experience one time. It'll rock your world. The devil will get inside of you and screw around with you in ways you never imagined. You haven't lived until your spouse, your husband or your wife looks at you and says, "I'm going to fire you." Did that happen to you? You haven't lived fully. You don't have enough life on you until your girlfriend or your boyfriend says, "You're fired." What's it like when your daughter or son says, "I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to be in a relationship with you anymore. You're fired." Every bit of that is grief. Grief is about loss of dreams, loss of hope, loss of vision, perspective, loss of ambition, loss of attitude, physical death. It's all of that. It's illness. It's just all that stuff. Limitation. You grieve the things you can no longer do. I remember my dad one time sitting there playing football with us. And so he goes out for this pass. I throw it to him. My other brother comes across, the other way, nails my dad. We're like, woo. It's like, it was sweet to someone. He got him up in the air, got him just sweet. Loved it. Except the thing was, my dad did not get up. And there you are sitting there, and your first thing you say is it was your little brother. You're like, "Crap, you killed Dad." I mean, what'd you do? Then it wasn't so cool. But he was like, he's laying there all spread out, and he finally gets his breath back, and he goes, "Did you think I was dead?" Like, "Were you thinking about taking my stuff?" Like, "No, I wasn't thinking about taking your stuff." He goes, "Yes, you were. You were thinking about taking my car, taking my stuff." I'm like, "I was not." He goes, "Well, I wasn't dead, but I really cannot, your brother cannot take a shot on me like that anymore because I have limitations. I'm not that young." You ever said that? You ever felt that? You ever felt like, man, I used to be able to do that trick on a wakeboard ever when I was 21. Now it's lethal, what I just did. I remember going down those moguls on this ski slope, and I was bad. I was just bad. tonight, it's not like I'm bad, like good looking. It's like I'm bad, like I'm really bad. Like I could die out here. You know, limitations are just, we can joke about them, but you know what? For all of us, they're really no fun. You get to that point, and someday you're going to get to this point where you're not going to have total recall of stuff. You're going to go, what is the name of that place where I was? What is that? What is that? About 10 minutes later, it'll come to you. In those 10 minutes, you got to figure out how to fake it. You say to the people around you, hey, do you remember what that place was called where we went? I mean, can you just find some kind of way? Because limitations will do anything to avoid them, because they all go to this sense somewhere in us of loss. And then there are even deeper losses, like you lose somebody to death, whopper. You know, you move away from people, whopper. There's a scale of stress. And you get a certain number of points for certain things that happen to you in your life, right? Like anybody here about to get married in the next year? Look, they're all afraid to raise their hand like, crap, what's going to happen to me? Well, for one thing, if you're not willing to raise your hand, sucker, it's going to go bad. I'm just telling you. But, like I'm just telling you, when you go to a party and somebody asks you, are you married? Is your wife here? You have to say yes. You can't look around and go, man, what do I say? I mean, not like tonight. This is not, you can't fake that. So there you are, and you're thinking about getting married, and you're thinking about, what is it going to be like when I get married? What's going to happen? What's going to change in my life? Am I going to be the same guy I was before I was married? Answer to the question, of course not. You're not. That chick is going to beat you down, man, I'm telling you. You'll be a little waif of your former self. You'll start off 6'2", couple years of marriage, you'll be 5'11". 20 years marriage, you'll be 5'4". She'll be 8'2". Amen. Don't act like you don't know this. But when you get, marriage, 200 points. Here's some other grief that we don't think about. Moving from one city to another, 400 points on the stress meter. 400 points. Death of somebody in your life, 800 points. Somebody in your life who's an addict or an alcoholic, 800 to 1,000 points. I could go on. You get to 1,000, you are to the point of extreme stress. And then grief just from stress sets in, because life isn't now put together in such a way that I can manage it the way I used to. I can't remember the last time I just came home and watched TV and hung out. All I can do now is worry about stuff. You been there? Everything's going along, and the biggest thing you had to worry about 6 months ago was what you're going to throw on the grill tonight. And then somebody calls you up and they say, did you know, she wasn't going to tell you, but I just want to tell you, maybe it's one of your siblings that, our mom, like mom she has leukemia or whatever. She has heart disease. And it goes through you. Have you had that call? It goes through you like a rocket. Like a rocket. And everything about your day and every day after that is going to change. Amen? Because now the steak will never taste like the steak tasted before, because you're going to be worried about her. You will not go through a day where you aren't thinking about her. You will not go through a day when the phone rings, you just sort of shake a little bit. You won't. There's grief in that sense of things getting to a place of being out of control. There's grief when your children get older, and they're like, they're 18, 19, 20, 22, and they're like out there and they're hanging out and they're doing what they want to do. And, you're so happy because they're growing up, except you're not, because you're watching stuff happen. You're like, oh, crap, this is just not going to be good. And you're watching a train wreck and it's going to happen. And you're like, man, I love the day when it was back when I would go to Target and I could buy them like matching tops and bottoms, and they like matched together, and they said, oh, Daddy, this is great, I love it. And that's all there was to it. Just have fun. Except now it's not. And you grieve the vulnerability of the way it was when you were a mom or a dad before that. You grieve the innocence in a marriage of what it was like when you were dating, and he could not get enough of you. I mean, bottom line is he was courting you, which means he was lying his butt off, but I mean, he was still paying a tremendous amount of attention to you. And now you're married 6 years. And you're like, he doesn't even freaking notice me. He doesn't even notice me. And she was all rah, rah, and you're going to take the world, honey, and you're going to like storm the place, and you're going to be the magic man. And 6 years later, she doesn't even call you by your name. It's deteriorated to something else. Clown or whatever. And you can joke about that, but there's grief, man, when the scales and the systems and the perceptions and the way it used to look change. There's grief. Lots of different avenues to talk about this. There's a perspective that someone named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross wrote a long time ago about grief and the way that we tend to manage it. And one of the fallacies about what we're going to talk about tonight is people tend to read what I'm about to put up here in a linear way. And they go, these things are exactly in this order. You go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Except, you know what? For those of you that are linear, those of you that are engineers, architects, lawyers, it doesn't work this way. If you're taking notes, you can take them, but you might as well jumble up what I'm about to show you. Amen? If you work with people that are grieving, you know exactly what I'm talking about. First piece of it is, there's a denial of the reality. There's a denial of the reality that I've lost what I've lost. Have you ever felt that? There's a denial of the reality that I've lost what I've lost. I can't believe it happened. I can't believe it's true. Somebody's got to show me. Somebody's got to prove it to me. Somebody's got to show me the evidence. What I want to believe is that if I just work harder, if I just work at it better, if I'm just stronger, it'll be okay. I grieve the loss of being when I thought I was in control of my drinking or in control of my using to where it's now completely out of control. And there's a cop standing at my car, and he's got his flashlight, and he's zooming it into my car, and he's going, "Sir," and he's banging on the glass, and I'm not really sure where it's coming from, but now I see his face, scares me to death. "Sir, can I talk to you?" You roll your window down. "Sir," light right in your eye. "Sir, can you step out of the car?" You're like, you think to yourself, man, I don't know if I really can or not. If I do step out of the car, it ain't going to be pretty. I can fall out of the car. And you realize that what you thought you were in control of, you were no longer in control of. And even though the evidence is right there and there's the ticket and you're going to go spend some time with the boys over here and you're going to get bailed out and all the litany of stuff that goes along with that, you get out the next day. What do you say in denial? You know what? That cop was looking for me. I think somebody called him up and tipped him off that I was driving. I really didn't have that much to drink. There was something wrong with his field sobriety test. I don't agree with the results. It wasn't that bad. Other people do it. I mean, I can just go on and on and on and on and on. And it's not just DUIs, it's a million other things. You get in the middle of grieving the loss of a marriage and you decide what you're going to do. Not so brilliant. What you're going to do is to soothe your pain instead of recognizing something is desperately wrong between us. I'm going to go sleep with somebody else. Sounds like a good idea. She will bring me comfort. He will bring me comfort. No, they will not. They will just extend the lie. They will extend the lie. But grief does this. Denial says what is true isn't true. What is real isn't real. I don't want to accept it because then I would have to deal with what is going on in front of me. And I don't want to. You move from there when you finally arrive at a place of it becoming unbelievably clear to you that you can no longer lie to yourself about something going on. The next piece of what happens is you get downright pissed. You get pissed that it happened. You get pissed that somebody let you down. Mad that somebody left you. Mad that they lied to you. Mad that they're not on your side. Mad that you can't trust them. Mad that you can't trust yourself. Mad that you're dying. Mad of a million things. But you get mad. You see, Anger is 100% of the time like a false emotion. When you're really angry, if someone stops you and they don't just go along with your pissness and they go, if someone were to stop you and they go, so you're pissed? And you're like, yes. And they said to you, well, let's talk about what it is that you have lost tonight. Where's the hurt? Where's the pain? Because anger is an outright false emotion. The deeper level is where the pain is underneath. Are you following me? The deeper level is who hurt you? What happened to you? How did you hurt yourself? What went on to cause this kind of anger in your life? It's a piece of this. Next piece of working this through is a bargaining piece where this happens a lot with God. This is where a ton of people get unbelievably disappointed in God. I told God that I would start going to church. I told God that I would go to AA. I told God that I would go to NA. I told God that I would do some do-good thing that made me feel like I was representing God the way I think God ought to be represented. And I went and saw my kid. I went and studied this. I went to counseling. When people tell me that in marriage, you know what? I even went to counseling. I'm like, and were you pissed when you went there? Yes, she made me go. He made me go. It's like, you should have never gone, sucker, because you just made yourself miserable. That's the bargain. And you know what? I went there and did what I was supposed to do, and God blew it. I prayed every day for my mom to get healed from leukemia, and God blew it because she died. And I had this thing with God. I told God I would go to church. I told God I would go to AA. I told God I would get sober. I told God I would stop doing this. I told God I would stop doing that. I told God I would stop being on the computer looking at porn. I told God, and he blew it. That takes you right back to the loss and right back to the anger, and it works in a circle. Next piece of this, you get through all that, and you're still in the grief. What do you think is going to happen next? You get downright depressed. You start to experience a big chunk of hopelessness. You start saying to yourself in some kind of a way, is this really all there is? Is this as good as it's going to get? Is this kind of emptiness that I feel what I'm going to have the rest of my life? Is that what's really going to happen to me? And you live there. And if you eventually find your way through the other side of grief, you do get, and this is what I want to talk about tonight, you do get to this place of acceptance of not only this loss in my life is legit, is real, is out of my control, I cannot change it, I cannot alter it, I cannot make it go away, I cannot hide it, and I cannot run from it. And I'm going to come to terms with what my life is like now based on what I have learned and the way I have grown from the grief that I've been in the middle of. Like Brent was saying last week, God uses grief to heal us. Because you've got to go through this process we're talking about tonight to get set free. Amen? If you don't, you stay stuck. And eventually, more of you is dead emotionally than is alive. More pieces of you are dead than are alive. You take people back and you go, when did you start doing this? When did this compulsion start? When did it happen? More often than not, what do we hear? Well, it started, whatever it is. It started when my brother was killed in a car crash. Were you driving? Yeah. It started when I got raped in college. Did you think it was your fault? Yeah. My friends told me I shouldn't have been out. They said, I shouldn't have walked that way. I should have people around me. I was foolish. I was an idiot. So you took responsibility for that violence. Yeah. It started when my dad got killed at work. Accident, industrial accident. I was only close to my grandmother Nobody else in my family paid any attention to me. And then, I was counting on her 100%. I was 14 and she died. And I found her dead at home. Started then. If we do not work our way through these experiences and exposures, we will not only stay sick and stay frozen and stay bound, but we will absolutely get sicker. You believe that? We will get sicker. We'll get sicker. In our relationships, the way we see life, our stuff with God, we'll get sicker. I want to show you a story about some guys that went through some grief tonight. And these are two guys that were hanging around with Jesus. And they had spent 3 years with Jesus. They were his disciples. And this is a story about these two guys and this walk they took one day to a place called Emmaus. And it was after Jesus' death on the cross. You got to remember in the story, in the storyline about Jesus, Jesus told these guys over and over and over and over again that he was coming back, that he was going to achieve a victory over sin, death, and the devil, that he was going to be raised from the dead. And just like us, you don't believe that until you see his face. Amen? You believe that that's incredible, impossible, and unreal. You believe that until you see Jesus' face, your resurrection as a person is incredible, impossible, and unreal. When you see Jesus' face, you can't imagine it any other way. That is a line of demarcation. Well, these guys were convinced that Jesus was dead. They had lost him forever. And they were in the middle of big league grief. And I want you to see the way that they handled it and the way that Jesus handled it. It says, that same day, 2 of Jesus' followers were walking to the village of Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. So it was like a 10K plus. As they walked along, they were talking about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things, Jesus himself suddenly came and began walking with them. But God kept them from recognizing him. He asked them, what are you discussing so intently as you walk along? They stopped short. Here's the grief. They stopped short. Sadness written across their faces. Then one of them, Cleophas, replied, you must be the only person in Jerusalem who hasn't heard about all the things that have happened there in the last few days. Talking about Jesus, his death on the cross, right? What things? Jesus asked. And now, these guys are going to begin their grief work. Because they are about to risk with Jesus what it's like to tell the story. How many of us tonight are carrying around a real massive burden, a secret, a loss, a grief driver that you have never shared with anybody else ever? That right there is literally living in hell. That is literally, absolutely living in hell on this earth. See, Jesus goes, here's the first piece of your recovery from grief is tell me the story. They say the things that happened to Jesus, the man from Nazareth. He was a prophet who did powerful miracles. He was a mighty teacher in the eyes of God and all the people. But our leading priests and other religious leaders handed him over to be condemned to death. And they killed him. We had hoped he was the Messiah who had come to rescue Israel. This all happened 3 days ago. So the first piece of recovery from grief is we got to be willing to risk telling the story. Can you tell me what it felt like? Can you tell me what happened? Can you tell me what you lost? Can you tell me what now you're afraid of because of what you lost? Can you tell me the story? And you don't have to tell that story to the whole world. You just got to tell the story to one person. Maybe you just want to tell the story to God. Maybe you just want to tell the story to Jesus. Fine. But you gotta tell the story. And number 2, after you tell the story, you got to be actually able to see the story. You got to ask yourself, what is it that I feel like I have lost? How am I in this story? I know that my grandmother died, but what died with her? What that I needed from her died with her. What did I lose? What is missing? What is gone in my life? What am I really grieving? What am I unable to manage? What is happening to me that is making me feel now like life is far, far, far out of control? You got to see yourself in the story and be able to begin to understand and talk about the truth of what actually happened to you. If you're in a dating relationship and it all goes sideways, you can live in the grief of that a long time, and it can actually freeze you. It can actually hold you hostage to where all you're really doing when you meet somebody else is you're like living as, I will never do this again, never do this, never do this, never do this. And that stuff's important because you learn, but you know what it can turn into is it can make us, grief unattended can make us unbelievably jaded and unresponsive and unreachable emotionally and spiritually. You know, you come to church and everybody's going crazy about this song up here, and they got their hands in the air and they're going at it, and you're sitting there going, God, how much longer do I have to be here? I'm nowhere close to being able to experience any kind of real worship. I'm coming out of my skin. Because I'm unavailable spiritually and emotionally. Because I can't really get down to not only what happened, the facts, but what is happening to me. What is my part of that story? You gotta be able to feel the whole story. You gotta be able to say, you know what? I am safe enough with my friend. I'm safe enough with Jesus. I'm safe enough with God to tell the whole story and experience all of it, because somebody in my life that I'm telling it to, I have confidence that they're not going to let me go. And you know what? If open share groups never teach anybody anything at Recovery of Cokesbury, I will guarantee you there are people in these groups tonight that can do that for you. That can hear your story, allow you to tell your whole story, allow you to feel it, sense it, acknowledge it, even have it overwhelm you, and they're not going to run from you, and they're not going to be afraid of you, and they're going to stay with you. Because those people have been empowered by Jesus to do exactly that tonight in your life. That's how good Jesus is at his job. And the story goes on, it says, by this time, they were nearing Emmaus at the end of their journey. Jesus acted as if he was going on, but they begged him, hey man, can you stay the night with us since it's getting late? So he went home with them. As they sat down to eat, he took the bread and blessed it. He broke it and gave it to them. Suddenly their eyes were opened and they recognized him. I mean, you see what he was doing, right? I mean, they were having communion, man. Jesus was having communion. The last thing he did with those guys was have communion before his death. The last time they saw him in person, he was having communion. The first time he sees them after his resurrection, he's having communion. That's how much Jesus wants to be in fellowship with us. You know, for us to get all the way through grief and heal all the way through those stages of grief, we have to be able to see the face of Jesus in our lives. You're like, well, man, I never thought church was that intimate. I never thought you got that close to Jesus. I thought he was kind of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, and he made you shake and quake. I didn't know you could see the face of Jesus. There's 100 million times in the Bible where Jesus says, you're going to get to see me face to face. It's a promise. It's a promise. I want that. I want to be right with you. We got to be able to get all the way through grief. We got to be able to listen to Jesus. He's going to say stuff like, follow me. He's going to say stuff like, you want to keep your life? You want to find your life? If you're in the middle of hell tonight, you have to, absolutely have to let go. If you want your life, you have to give up the one you have, and I will give you a new one. But you can't keep them both, man. This ain't Walmart where you pick 4 varieties of light bulbs. This is one life. I'm the deliverer. You got to be the let goer. We got to listen to Jesus. We got to accept Jesus. And that's probably the hardest thing I'm talking about tonight is in order for you to accept Jesus, you got to be able to say, I got to be able to say, you know what? I choose Jesus. I choose Jesus over my loss of control. I choose Jesus over the pain that I'm in tonight. I choose Jesus over the way I thought life ought to work out and hasn't. I choose Jesus over the way I used to accommodate the stuff in my life. I choose Jesus over everything and everyone. And you know what? When you do that, you will start to heal. There's no, this thing of Jesus, it really is like a jump, man. You don't have to have all the answers. You just got to jump. He's like, right here, right here. And see, try to jump to yourself. You've been trying that for a while? Try to jump to yourself. That's what we do when we use our compulsion to try to hide from our pain. That is what we do. We are jumping to ourselves. We are literally going, I feel like crap. I'm going to try to take care of myself. I will now proceed to jump to myself. It's like you will fall on your butt. That's what's going to happen. You're like, not really though. I mean, it didn't hurt that bad though. I mean, okay. But when you jump to Jesus, it's all life. When you jump to Jesus, it's all love. When you jump to Jesus, it's all truth. When you jump to Jesus, it's all new. You know what, man? This altar is going to be open. We're going to sing our way out of worship, and I'll tell you what, I really think it's time to jump. In Jesus' sweet name, amen.